Before we get into the discussion of this deck, I do want to add some context, which centers around Milotic, which was an underrated and underused card during this season. It wasn't until later seasons where people really took a closer look at this card and began to realize how useful it could be when used correctly. So this deck list is a bit of a retrospective and going back and looking and going, well, why weren't people using it? Let's build a Milotic deck for 2004 and see how it goes. Actually, turns out it's pretty good. People were using it at the time, just not to the full efficiency that people realized later on. So when I do more videos about the 2005, 2006, 2007 seasons, you will see this card pop up more as it finds places in future decks. If you showed someone this card for the first time, they would say, this is terrible. Its Poke Power heals your opponent's Pokemon. Distorted Wave heals your opponent's Pokemon. And before dealing damage, why would you pay 4 energy to deal 50 damage? But that's coming from the classic dichotomy of Pokemon thinking in the TCG, where a card is either an attacker or a support card. And in this case, Milotic is neither. It is 100% a momentum breaker. A lot of decks in this format, and especially in future formats, are focused on lining up these big moves late game where you're sniping your opponent's bench here and there, you're dealing chip damage to the active, or you find yourself in the common situation of your opponent setting you up for a KO next turn off of an ATM rock that you know that they have in hand, or best case scenario, you're up against something like an Explode deck that's just spreading damage all over the place looking for multiple knockouts in a single turn. No matter the situation, you drop a Feebas, you rare candy into Milotic, Healing Shower ruins your opponent's strategy, nullifies their deck, doesn't matter if you're healing their Pokemon or not. You keep on trucking with Walrein and you win through consistency instead of flashy gimmicks. Another key point here is that Healing Shower does not heal Pokemon EX, yours or your opponent's. So if you are up against an EX deck, Healing Shower is just free Pokemon Center for all of your Pokemon. So why pair it with Walrein? Well, first thing is it's got that stage 2 bulk. It's got some decent energy acceleration with its Poke Power Crush Draw, so it lends itself well to early game setup, and benefiting from a Milotic evolution into depriving your opponent of a prize on their next turn if they are close to a Walrein knockout, but mostly it is because of sheer cold. For 3 energy you are dealing 50 damage. You can also accelerate an energy onto Walrein to begin using this attack as early as turn 2. Then you flip a coin. If heads, the defending Pokemon cannot attack during your opponent's next turn. So not only are you dealing 50 damage for a fair amount of energy, but you are also preventing a follow-up attack from your opponent 50% of the time. And yes, they can wiggle out of it by using gusting effects, switching effects, but then you're forcing your opponent to use all of their gusting and switching resources very early game just to get out of this sheer cold effect. We've already established that this game is built for the late game. You can take all the damage you want. Your opponent can retreat and waste energy. They can use their resources to swap out to get out of this effect, but you're going to drop a Milotic and heal all of your Pokemon, so your opponent's going to put a lot of effort into actually stacking some damage on your side of the field just for it to go away. And you just keep swinging with the same Walrein, dealing that 50 damage, potentially preventing their next attack. The deck is very simple, but it's also very nuanced, and if you don't know how to play against it, you're gonna have a bad time. The last key feature of Walrein is it's a water type, and you're gonna be hitting a lot of these big fire types like Blaziken decks for weakness, while on the flip side, Walrein is weak to steel, and there's not a steel Pokemon to be seen in this metagame. Yeah, they exist, but they're not being played. So you have your key players. What does the rest of the deck look like? Let's go ahead and have a look. It's honestly not much beyond what we've already talked about. We have a 4-3-4 line of Walrein. This field's only got 40 HP, which can be a liability if you're not finding those evolution cards early enough. The 3 Celio are in here mainly as a protection from ATM Rock if you know that is a card your opponent's likely to be playing. Super Icy Wind can be used from time to time on that turn 2. Ultimately, spreading damage around is not going to tie into what this deck is doing anyway, because Milotic is going to drop in and heal off all that damage anyway. But Walrein is going to be your primary attacker in this deck. Once you have Sheer Cold powered up, you're just going to be using it over and over and over and over again, and then just healing whenever Walrein is in danger of being knocked out. by that point you're already going to have another Walrein set up on the bench. So this style of gameplay does tend to make the game go a little long. For the Milotic line, we have a 2-2 lineup here. I actually clicked Milotic a few too many times when I was setting up this deck list. So total, we're looking at 18 Pokemon. The 3 Dunsparce are here just for setup. It's 2004. Dunsparce is just an auto include. There's no faster way to get your setup than by starting the game with one of these guys. Moving over to the trainer base, we got a lot of draw power in here, starting with 3 copies of Copycat, 3 copies of Steven's Advice, and 4 copies of TV Reporter. I just love TV Reporter. I'm putting a full playset in almost every single deck I build in these formats. But on top of that, we also have 4 copies of Oracle. Oracle lets you search your deck for 2 specific cards, put those cards on top of your deck. This is important for Walrein's ability. So going back over here to Walrein, Crush Draw allows you to reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a water energy, you attach that to one of your Pokemon. If it's not a water energy, then you just put it back where it was. Oracle's going to make sure that every time you use that ability, it's going to be a water energy. So aside from just drawing a bunch of cards with the supporters, you're also going to be smoothing out your draws and making sure that you are hitting a crush draw as much as possible, really getting that acceleration going, powering up as many Walreins on the bench as you can. So aside from the draw, we also have 2 copies of Warp Point in here, just in case your Walrein in the active position gets poisoned or gets hit with another special condition. You have a way to get it out of there because this boy chunky. You don't really want to be paying a retreat cost of 3, so Warp Point is in here to help you out. We also have a couple copies of Fastball in here just because there are so many evolution cards in here, and hitting those evolutions will be key to getting a quick setup and getting this deck up and running the way it needs to be. Dunsparce is going to be able to grab all those basic Pokemon for you, which is going to remove them from the deck and allow Fastball to hit those evolution cards a lot easier. And then once you have those evolution cards, you also have 3 copies of Rare Candy in here. You're not always gonna be just going Spheal, Rare Candy, Walrein. These Rare Candies are mostly in here for Milotic, just because you don't want to play a Feebas with only 30 HP and then have to leave it in play for a turn, giving your opponent plenty of space to stop the Milotic drop. Instead, you want to make sure you have the Feebas and the Milotic in hand. And then you're going to Feebas, Rare Candy, get that healing shower off without giving your opponent any time to do anything about it, though it also doesn't hurt to just get a Walrein into play faster. So Rare Candy can accomplish that as well. 3 copies of Desert Ruins, like I was talking about with the Celio's attack. It almost seems counterintuitive to run Desert Ruins because all of the damage you'd be stacking on your opponent's EX Pokemon is just going to get showered away by Milotic, but this also does put pressure on your opponent if they're running EX decks. But it also counts as a counter stadium just in case your opponent is becoming overly reliant on a specific stadium in their deck. But overall, it's just in there to put some pressure on, and your opponent's going to feel that when these games are going long and they're having to skip turns to attack him because of sheer cold, but they're still accruing damage. Because the Milotic is pretty key to this deck, and it can get KO'd while the other one may be stuck in your prizes, I do have 2 copies of Town Volunteer in here just to recycle the Feebas and Milotic as needed. Otherwise, you can just get energy back into your deck. That way, Walrein still has targets for its power. You don't want to be crush drawing every turn and just revealing the top card of your deck. Then you would just be giving away information to your opponent for no reason. Speaking of energy, I do have 2 copies of Double Rainbow Energy in here. It's going to allow you to attack with sheer cold faster, and Walrein's not going to care about the reduced damage because you're not looking to do any big OKOs or 2-hit KOs. You're really just drawing this game out as long as possible. So Double Rainbow can allow you to get that up and running faster without caring about the reduced damage. And then of course the deck's going to get topped off with plenty of water energy. That way you have some targets for Crush Draw, allowing you to accelerate faster and also just get more water energy into your hand with all the draw power that this deck has. So let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. This deck is very gimmicky and it relies on coin flips a lot. If you are not hitting the extra effect on sheer cold consistently, then your opponent has a lot of opportunity to just wipe you out. It is also my opinion that this deck is not very fun to play or play against. It is the Pokemon equivalent of Azorius Control. All it wants to do is make the game go really long and either force you to scoop because you're frustrated and playing against it, or just slowly tear away at you with sheer cold, without really giving you the opportunity to respond. But if that's the type of playstyle you enjoy, I ain't gonna be mad at it. It just isn't for me. If that is your playstyle, you might want to consider playing Mr. Bronny's Compassion in this deck. Its scoop up effect gives you another option of depriving your opponent of prizes. Even after they've worked so hard to stack damage on you, you can just yoink it away from them with a Compassion. Alternatively, if you want faster KOs yourself, then you can play ATM Rock. That way, as you're stacking damage with Sheer Cold, you have an alternative way to just drop a surprise attack and devolve your opponent's Pokemon, getting a KO that way. As always, let me know down below what you thought about this deck. Let me know what some of your favorites from the 2004 season are so far, as well as what you would like to see in future videos. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.